Hello everyone. Well, the verdict has come out on IndyCamp, and as was predicted, the Parliament did not rule against itself. JA, back in 2012, did an appeal to humanity offering the benefits of bringing back God's law. The benefits of bringing back God's law is the true Jubilee, and the true Jubilee is forgiveness of all debts, which is supposed to take place every 7 years, but doesn't happen under man's satanic legislative system. No one showed up. Millions of emails were sent out to millions of people to simply show up, and no one did. People chose in 2012, through their actions, decided that they would rather work under man's Babylonian slave system of the New World Order. There's nothing new about the New World Order. It's the enslavement system that's been eroding God's laws since its inception. Jesus came 2,000 years ago to wake people up then. And what did they do? They had him crucified. Jesus was a dissident. Jesus bucked the system. Jesus bucked man-made legislation and wanted people to eliminate their arrogant pride, thinking that they know better than God's laws. And as a result, the world has spiraled out of control. Man is enslaved, working for the dollar or the pound or whatever monetary system your country operates under. And you are enslaved because you do not support God's laws. And as a result, God is going to allow punishment to befall the earth. Where people believe that they should fight for their own country's constitution, parliamentary laws, there's going to be mass death as a result of World War III. The fact that I'm actually even having this conversation, discussing this possibility, or should I say probability, is mind-numbing. The ramifications of nuclear winter and all that comes along with it, where billions of people are going to die, simply because they're too arrogant to go back to God's law and fight for God's law and stand up to evil, satanic repression. Because people are too complacent with their comforts and luxuries of money and mammon, that is all temporary. You can't take this stuff to heaven.
Stop making my father's house a marketplace!
Since the trial in IndyCamp has taken place, so much has happened. It's kind of mind-boggling. I will go over the result of the judge's verdict. Unfortunately, people have chosen not to do the right thing. No one showed up to support the IndyCamp group, and as a result, the satanic rulers of the parliamentary system, which the Queen is behind, that whole system is being allowed to be perpetuated because people would rather be enslaved than stand up for independence and to follow God's laws. And as a result of humanity making a conscious choice by not doing anything, God is going to allow World War III to happen. And since this verdict came down, so much has taken place. Steve Pieczenik came out to expose the coup d'etat that's taking place in the United States and supposedly a counter-coup. The bottom line is, these Luciferians have had thousands of years to plan this. I can only pray that God's people are actually intervening and fighting against Satan and these Satanists that are imposing their new world order on humanity. The Jesuits are behind it, and the Queen is at the top of the pyramid, and Satan is leading her. So Satan is the absolute pinnacle of this pyramid of power. Below Satan, you have the Queen of England, you have the Jesuits in the Vatican working through the Pope, and you have the District of Columbia in the United States, the Jesuit-controlled politicians in the United States that are using the United States economy and the dollar in order to manipulate the world. And it's all to create the new world order of Satan. These Ashkenaz Zionist Jews from Israel, they are not of God. They do not follow God's law. They follow the Talmud and any other man-made legislation, Parliament, the Constitution. All these things are not God's law. And as long as people, through their arrogance and self-worth, want to follow man-made legislation, God's going to allow the judgment to befall and destroy the 12 lost tribes of Israel. It's unfortunate, and man has made a choice. And God is watching, and He's going to allow the prophesied biblical end times to unfold and unravel, which is happening right now. They want to create civil war in the United States in order to get rid of as many people as possible in the United States and to disarm them. Once they're able to succeed in disarming the American people, that's when they will turn the United States into China. This is what the New World Order plan is. The one world government, to have anybody who will be passive and go along with the system to be enslaved as the people in China are. This is prophesied. All these things are going to unfold because people did not support this trial in Scotland to bring back God's law. Father will allow any effort to bring back His law here on planet Earth to succeed. But if man, through either complacency or not doing anything to impose God's law here on earth, and that's the Torah, then God is going to allow all the horrors that are prophesied in the Bible to unfold. And we're watching it happen right now in real time. Hannah Michaels published another article that I'd like to bring to your attention in regards to the verdict as a result of the IndyCamp appeal. The Court of Sessions has made its decision as outlined in IndyCamp eviction appeal thrown out by court decision. Just as expected, the open and shut case upheld Alan Turnbull's decision. They say no human rights were violated, which addresses only one of the four groups of appellants. According to Jar's second affidavit, he wrote the Turnbull's decision that their argument on human rights of IndyCamp to occupy the land over others was correct. Thus, all this group and their spokesman Keatings did in court was essentially rehash the same failed argument as Christ told them. He told them they were always going to lose because they put their faith in the wrong system. The court addressed this group's argument because it was the only one they could argue against. However, they conveniently ignored and lost, quote-unquote, the argument they could not argue against, God's law in Christ's affidavit. They also ignored and rejected the assertion by the Stone of Destiny group and David and Arthur Gemmell that the judges were incompetent to judge on the matter, as well as a request by all four groups to have a jury trial. The arrest of Stephen Criley, which coincided with the date of the appeal hearing, was first released on this blog. News spread by social media and the BBC ran a brief article, threats charged over the IndyCamp court appeals papers. Criley is still curious as to why his arrest coincided with the hearing on October 19th. He took the option of speaking with a duty lawyer before seeing the sheriff, and Criley agreed that no plea would be offered and bail conditions would be accepted. The duty lawyer told him that it would take up to 6 weeks before he would hear from the court, and Criley would be contacted from the Glasgow office by post. Criley said this is when he will learn the official charges against him. They are going to prosecute me for sending the affidavit, the same affidavit that the court said went missing, quote unquote. Criley asked, how can they arrest Criley over an affidavit whilst claiming they don't have the affidavit? It has now been learned that the court received at least 7 copies of Christ's second affidavit, 2 by registered post, and at least 5 hand-delivered copies. Although they refused to stamp them when these documents were submitted, obviously so they could quote-unquote lose them. Criley's arrest was based on the registered copies submitted to the court, which again instructed them to return to God's laws, which is something they absolutely do not want to hear or do. They continue to fail executing true judgment. Please go to the King of Kings Bible. Link will be provided below, and read Zechariah 7:9 to 7:13. It is considered criminal activity of the courts to quote-unquote lose submitted documents and lie about them having quote-unquote gone missing because they cannot refute them. Is this honorable? No, it certainly suggests the court enjoys a corruptible amount of control and does what it likes within its compound. They are in violation of God's law, as outlined in both Christ's affidavits. The court is most likely violating human rights, as David pointed out in court, as well as violating God's law. Leona Dorian, described as hand-picked for the job by led the panel of judges during the hearing. It was her who interjected the opinions of the judges to keep things on the fast track, including her comment about a jury trial, of which she wants to hear no more about it. Was she trying to squash any information coming forth during the trial that would cause the SPCB to lose? Does this not amount to bias and corruption? Of course it does. At the hearing, David, one of the appellants, asked the judge to recuse themselves because they weren't applying Scots law and were committing criminal offenses. In particular, Dorian should have recused herself to avoid an act of treachery. This is well described in the article entitled IndyCamp Appeal Court Treachery, which outlines Dorian's association with the Scottish Parliament corporate body through its law firm, Brodie's LLP. Quote, David understood, as do the rest of the Indy campers now, Lady Leona Dorian had no right to sit in judgment when the legal firm representing MSPs, in this case, also serve on the board of the company that served the board of her solicitor's firm in London, with Lady Dorian, representative from the Brodie's LLP, saying nothing of their conflict of interest. IndyCamp Appeal Court Treachery. The title about her treachery also explains judicial recusal, where a judge must step down if there is an apparent bias. A judge must step down in circumstances where there appears to be a bias or apparent bias. Judicial recusal is not then a matter of discretion. The test for determining apparent bias is this: if a fair-minded and informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there was a real possibility that the judge was biased, The judge must recuse himself. See Porter versus McGill, 2002. The test to be applied having regard to all the circumstances of the case, and to maintain society's trust and confidence, justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. They have lost society's trust and confidence. This isn't the only case where obvious conflicts of interest are apparent, and instead of recusing themselves, it would seem the judge's certain interests are actually being selected for certain trial hearings. For example, Robbie the Pict claimed an impartiality of judge decisions were tainted by their membership in the Speculative Society, a secret brotherhood society, with the usual benign cover story as the purpose for its existence. Robbie the Pict revealed that Sir Ian Noble, chairman of Sky Bridge Company, controversial island link opened in 1995, and the then Transport Minister, Lord James Douglas Hamilton, responsible for the construction and financing of the bridge, plus 12 of the judges who presided over the appeals, were all members of the Speculative Society of Edinburgh. The background to Robbie the Pict's case dealt with the 1989 decision of the government to fund the Skye Bridge privately, not publicly. The bridge connected Isle of Skye with the mainland, and developers were to reclaim their costs with the toll road. The private consortium invested just £500,000, from which it is due to reap some £88 million from the people of Skye. The toll turned out to be the highest per-mile road in the world. Many of the islanders refused to pay, arguing that the paperwork legalizing the toll roads had never been published. The 496 islanders were prosecuted for their refusal to pay. Of the ones who appealed, their arguments were dismissed. There is more to that story if anyone is interested in doing his own research, but it offers another example of obvious conflict of interest where judges do not recuse themselves, and offers more proof there is something sinister within the Scottish judicial and political systems. For example, political establishment rigs elections. It's really not in who votes, but who counts the votes. In the United States, early Texas voters have found their straight Republican Party vote changed to Hillary Clinton for president. Another example is the first referendum vote in Scotland. It was rigged, and the evidence can easily be found within an internet search. The IndyCamp Court Appeal Treachery article also discloses the underhanded means by which they rig the vote. Interestingly, 1998, the case involving Robbie the Pict versus Miller Civil Engineering, and the Secretary of State revealed that the QC representing the government was a speculative society knight. This QC, Duncan Menzies, now a judge, is one of the three who presided over the IndyCamp appeal hearing. Speculative society may be involved in Sheridan case, January 2, 2011. The website has received alarming news that Lord Turnbull and Lord Brocadle, both judges at the respective Sheridan cases, are members of the Speculative Society. The website's legal sources stated, "It would be very easy to believe that this were true, and if so, the jury and the court should have been made aware of this, especially before Lord Brocadle instructed the jury." The Speculative Society is held to be a sinister club, although Sir Stephen Young, QC, BT, a fellow member, stated at a recent hearing in Dingwall Sheriff Court, quote, that it's just like a dance club. And according to lawfullawyers.co.uk, established to give the general public and lawyers an opportunity to discuss results of civil and criminal cases after decisions have been reached by the courts, reported that Alan Turnbull, who presided over IndyCamp's first trial, was a member of the Speculative Society. If Turnbull's membership is true, it also supports Robbie the Pict's claims that members include some of the most powerful people in Scotland, including senior judges, lawyers, sheriffs, and more. Robbie the Pict and Lord Cullen, who chaired the Dunblane inquiry, was a member, as were Lord Coulsfeld and McClellan, two of the three judges who heard the Lockerbie trial. Without going into too much depth, one can ascertain that the speculative society, as well as other old-school tie networks, could easily work together to affect decisions made by any of its members. Quote, "It's who you know, not what you know," is an expression to describe exactly what goes on in political, judicial, and corporate environments. Thus, it's not a far fetch of the imagination that many trials and hearings in Scotland have infringed upon people's rights to fairness, because parties scratch each other's backs, support brothers, or devise plans for financial gain. Can judges be fair when they run in private circles with politicians, CEOs, and other power players? Again, this is why God gave us the law, which would ensure justice and fairness for all. When man decided to start making up his own legislation and falsely calling it law, evil began to break down God's law and replace it with a system it could easily manipulate through secrecy, bribes, blackmail, and greed. Is it not apparent by now? Ecclesiastes 10:6. Folly is set in great high places, Ephesians 6:12, and the wise sit in low places. Those who will survive the fire will learn to let the inhabitants of the rock sing the new song, the song of Moses and the Lamb. You can't fight the system is another expression we use in our complacency. No, we can refuse to fight. The beast system will never be satisfied, just as the giants who towered over the people were never satisfied before they were destroyed in the flood. The Book of Enoch/Idris from the King of Kings Bible, verses 7:11 to 7:14. And they conceiving brought forth giants, Genesis 6:4 to 6:6, whose stature was 300 cubits. These devoured all which the labor of men produced, until becoming impossible to feed them. So they then turned themselves against men in order to devour them, and begin to injure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, to eat their flesh, one after another, and to drink their blood. The Lord saw that all men did was evil continually, so he cleansed the earth with water, and gave a few a fresh start. Solomon 14:6. For in the old time also, when the proud giants perished, the hope of the world governed by thy hand escaped in a weak vessel, Noah's ark, and left all the ages a seed of generation. He again is going to give a few a fresh start, but this time cleansing the earth with fire. This isn't going to include the giants who tower over the people today, likened to the beast system's chief operating officers, oppressing and devouring the masses. The system is rigged, and it's not in your favor. When you come across injustice, you must fight it, and in many cases, be the David in the David and Goliath story. He did it with a stone. Your stone is the truth. Genesis 49:24 from the King of Kings Bible. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the cornerstone of Israel. Daniel 2:34-35 and 45, cross-reference. Luke 20:17 and 18. And he beheld them, and said, What is this then that is written? The stone which the builders rejected, the same stone has become the head of the corner? Whosoever shall fall upon that stone shall be broken, but on whomever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. The Book of 2 Esdras gives us more detail about what would be going on in the world with the stone would sound. 2 Esdras 5:5 from the King of Kings Bible. And blood, life, shall drop out of wood, deforestation, and the stone, the Messiah, Christ, Mahdi, shall give his voice, and the people shall be troubled, and the air goings, wind patterns, shall be changed, El Nino, trade winds, etc. It also described many signs that are currently happening to us when the Sun of Righteousness, see Malachi 4:2, would suddenly shine and lighten the people. Again, in the night, in the darkness. He is magnifying the law, just as described in Isaiah 42:21. The I Am is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will magnify the law and make it honorable. Deuteronomy 33:21. Does anyone ever stop to think what Jah did by submitting his affidavit of truth? It magnifies God's law. No one can argue against it. Thus, the opposition's snake-like thing to do is ignore it or lose it, or even devise an unfair scheme to war against him. There is only one thing they're forgetting. He will make war with them. Revelation chapter 19. He will set a variance among the people, and he will fulfill the law. Matthew 5:17-18. Men will never be able to fairly govern other men without the law. This was told to us when we begged for a king to judge us. 1 Samuel 8:6. God's response was as follows. 1 Samuel 8:10. And Samuel told all the words of the I Am unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint them captains over thousands, and captains over 50s, and will set them to sow his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields, and your vineyards, and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed, and of your vineyards, and give it to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants, and your maidservants, and your goodliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And ye shall cry out in that day because of your king which ye shall have chosen you. And the I Am will not hear you in that day. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, Nay, but we will have a king over us. All Lucifer and his synagogue of Satan had to do was infiltrate the crown and its governing bodies to accomplish their goals. And England's current fraudulent crown, Elizabeth II, has given assent to thousands of pieces of legislation that have robbed the British people. The Scots want independence from the English monarchy, yet they do not see that the oppression will not end, because there is a cancer within their own system, and it's the same cancer that wants alignment with the European Union, a front for the Communist Party given birth after World War II, proving that Hitler finally won the war, enslaving the United Kingdom, Christ's kingdom. The oppression will not stop. Thus trading one evil for another isn't the answer. The answer is found by heeding Christ's words about God's law, which will be the last government on earth. God did not allow Elizabeth II to be crowned on the authentic stone of destiny in 1953, because he has reserved the right for the Shiloh, the Christ. Scotland is likely to remain part of the United Kingdom in the end, because it will be given to Christ, Ezekiel 21:27. Plus, the Bible states the final war will be the 12 tribes of Israel against the rest of the world. Scotland is the home of Judah Zara, one tribe of true Israel. This might put a timeline on the war. World War III could possibly start before the referendum vote. Time will tell. God's will is the only one worth supporting. Richard McFarlane brought up World War III at the hearing because he understands what is at stake, and he understands the prophecies about his tribe. The West is hell-bent on provoking Russia, and Russia is done with the West's lies. More Russian warships have entered the Mediterranean, joined by China. This isn't conspiracy. It's biblical prophecy that the kings of the East will defeat God's witnesses. The clock is ticking, and the war drums are louder than ever. Russia and China will ascend like a storm and cover the land. Ezekiel chapter 38. bringing an army of 200 million men. Revelation 9:16. The arrogant West will be unprepared. The West, now hated by the rest of the world for all its unfairness, war, theft, death, destruction, and atrocities, will be defeated, causing the rest of the world to rejoice. Revelation 11:10. And they that dwelt upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts to one another, because these two prophets, olive trees, tormented them that dwelt on the earth. Remember, what goes around comes around. Zechariah 7:13. Therefore it has come to pass, that as he cried, and they would not hear, so they cried, and I would not hear, saith the I am Lord of hosts. So as you can see, it is prophesied that the United States and Great Britain will fall at the hands of Russia and China. It's in the Bible. The prophecies that are about to unfold now, which you are watching in the news every day, is a result of the failure of man to rise up and support what took place in IndyCamp. IndyCamp was very symbolic as a last-ditch effort for humanity to try to reinstate God's laws. And humanity has allowed their court systems to rule over them. The word legal is a man-made fabrication. It's either lawful or, in God's eyes, it doesn't exist. Man's legislations, created by constitutions, created by parliaments, created by governments, created by man, created by churches. The Vatican is the head of the beast. The Queen is the head of the beast. These two entities use the District of Columbia in the United States to spread their disease across the world in the name of war. The Freemasons predicted World War I, World War II, World War III through Albert Pike. And it's all unfolding right now, before our eyes in slow motion. And this is all judgment by God, and it's allowed to happen because man did not stand up and impose God's law. Christ is here today. He's here now, hoping and praying that humanity will do the right thing and instill him as the rightful King of Kings. But as what took place 2,000 years ago, people are stupid. They won't reinstate him above the synagogue of Satan as it was 2,000 years ago. Unfortunately, the negative side of the prophecy will be fulfilled, unless man rises up. It is prophesied that we will overcome. Unfortunately, a war has to take place first. Okay guys, live in love, peace.